This is the story of a fearless warrior who crossed every limit to protect his king. In order to help his king regain power, he even went as far as kidnapping the enemy king's daughter. The thrilling tale begins in a century where France had expanded massively. Every king was attempting to gain full control of France. However, two dominant factions existed within France, bitter rivals trying to overthrow each other and seize control. But the power struggle always came to a halt because neither side was willing to back down. One of the kings, troubled and desperate, sought the help of Lord Boris, a highly skilled warrior known for training many soldiers. The king wanted Boris to train his troops. We are then introduced to Jane, a soldier stationed in a hilly region with his comrades. Jane worked directly under Lord Boris and considered him a godlike figure, devoted to obeying his every command. While stationed on the hill, Jane and his fellow soldiers witnessed enemy troops approaching Boris's chariot. It was clearly an ambush meant to assassinate Boris. Jane couldn't just stand by and watch his mentor be killed. He and his men charged down the hill and executed a brilliant counterattack, killing the enemy soldiers. Jane, in fact, was the most powerful fighter in Boris's entire squad. With remarkable skill, he took down many opponents while Boris also defended himself fiercely. Eventually, Jane and his squad defeated the enemies. A few were taken alive for interrogation. That's when we learned something crucial: Jane and his soldiers weren't being paid well. Despite risking their lives for the king and Boris, they struggled financially and could barely support their families. This growing frustration raised the possibility of betrayal in the future. During the interrogation, one captured soldier revealed that it was Henry who had ordered the attack. They were paid in gold coins to kill Lord Boris. Jane was furious upon learning this. Meanwhile, Henry was shown meeting with another king named Vance. Vance had a younger brother named Shaggy, and they were discussing plans within their palace. King Vance had been dominating the region for quite some time. Despite opposition from Boris and others, Vance controlled a far larger territory. Henry tried to convince him that unless they eliminated Boris, conquering all of France would be impossible. Boris commanded a massive army, rivaling the strength of multiple factions. That's why Henry had sent those assassins. However, their plan failed, Boris survived, and Jane's squad saved him. Shortly after, Boris himself arrived and revealed that he had suspected Henry all along. Henry had always envied Boris and had now shown his true colors. But even then, he refused to strike Boris dishonorably. He left the scene with his soon-to-be wife, Catherine, clearly disrespecting Boris in the process. Jane was later shown moving forward with his team when they encountered Lord Torek, once a comrade but now aligned with Henry. Torek had been lured by Henry's wealth and now trained his soldiers. Once upon a time, he and Jane fought for the same cause. But money had blinded Torek, turning him into an enemy. Though Jane knew Torek was a good man at heart, greed had changed him. Torek gave Jane a cold stare and walked away. Lord Boris then summoned Jane and his soldiers, warning them that if they didn't act soon, King Vance would strike again. Boris believed they needed to make the first move, and his plan was to kidnap Catherine, Henry's future wife. By holding her hostage, they could force Henry to comply. Jane was shocked at first. The idea of kidnapping an innocent woman, especially one about to be married, seemed deeply wrong to him. But Lord Boris insisted, if they didn't act now, their kingdom would fall. Jane and his soldiers knew multiple attacks were bound to happen, and their military strength was no match. With no other option left, Jane finally agreed to Lord Boris's plan. Some time later, we see Jane's entire group of soldiers celebrating. They now had plenty of resources, and every warrior was in high spirits. But Jane quietly walked alone into the forest. Eventually, we learn that he was on his way to visit his brother, Jairo. Once a warrior himself, Jairo had left military life behind after starting a family. He now lived in a house deep in the forest. Jane would occasionally visit him. Jairo's son, Tom, was now grown, and he admired Jane for his incredible fighting skills. Jairo would often tell Tom stories of how brave and powerful his elder brother Jane was. Inspired, Tom declared he would one day become a fearsome warrior just like Jane and Jairo, defending the kingdom. But Jairo wanted no such thing for his son. He knew firsthand how dangerous a soldier's life was and couldn't bear the thought of losing Tom. Despite retiring, Jairo still protected the forest villagers. He had never truly stopped being a warrior. Jane, saddened by his brother's humble life, gave him a handful of gold coins so Jairo could better care for his family. Tom, meanwhile, promised to become a great warrior one day. Elsewhere, Henry and his fiancée Catherine were shown traveling with their guards and arriving at a church. Catherine was a devout believer who loved praying to God, whereas Henry was the complete opposite, an atheist. He told Catherine he would return home and that she should come back with the soldiers once she finished. Inside the church, Catherine began to pray, surrounded by ordinary villagers. As she prayed, a man approached her, saying the senior priest was calling for her urgently. It was something important related to her life. Though skeptical, Catherine agreed to go. But when the priest turned around, it was Jane in disguise. His soldiers suddenly surrounded her and kidnapped her. Catherine screamed, but her guards were stationed outside. Jane's men dragged her out through the back, blending in with the crowd, and quickly escaped into the forest, where no one would suspect anything. When Catherine was finally taken out of the carriage deep in the woods, she was furious. She shouted that kidnapping her from a church was a grave sin and that they would all face serious consequences. But Jane's soldiers laughed. They were all atheists who didn't fear divine judgment. As they traveled further, Jane began revealing the truth about Henry and King Vance. Along the path, the trees were lined with hanging corpses. Jane told Catherine that this cruelty was carried out by none other than Henry and his loyal servant, Lord Torek. They wanted to crush anyone who stood in the way of their plans to seize the entire kingdom. In fact, Henry was trying to overthrow King Vance and take his throne. Catherine was stunned and enraged by what she heard. She was deeply disappointed. How could Henry be so ruthless? Meanwhile, Henry was seen at home, entertaining another woman. But when he noticed his soldiers returning without Catherine, he panicked. He immediately ordered a large-scale search, and soon, the entire village was buzzing with the news. Even King Vance was informed and put a huge bounty out for Catherine's return. Everyone wondered, why was Catherine so important? Was there a deadly secret behind her kidnapping? The answer was soon to be revealed. Jane and his team had hidden Catherine inside different forest caves to keep their location secure. Though Catherine pleaded to be released, they made it clear she wouldn't be allowed to leave until their mission was complete. Meanwhile, Henry stormed over to CG and demanded to know where his bride-to-be was. He suspected that King Vance might have staged this entire plot to weaken Henry's position. While CG didn't fully believe that, he had always harbored some doubts. To calm Henry, he assured him that he would take personal responsibility for finding Catherine and immediately ordered Lord Torek to begin the search. Their first suspect was Jairo, Jane's brother who lived in the forest. Torek and his men set out toward Jairo's house. Poor Jairo, unaware of the danger, was returning home with his son Tom after a typical day. Little did he know, it was about to be his last. Lord Torek eventually reached Jairo's home and began beating him brutally. Tom, Jairo's young son, even tried to fight back, but Torek attacked him as well. The strike was so severe that Tom had little chance of surviving. He died right there. Torek and his men captured Jairo, planning to use him as leverage to demand Catherine's return. When Jane learned what had happened, he rushed to his brother's house, only to find Tom's lifeless body hanging outside. The sight devastated him. Villagers, who had always held deep respect for Jairo, were outraged. In their fury, they called for revenge against everyone connected to the enemy kingdom, even Catherine. But Jane, despite his anger, calmed everyone down. He buried Tom with honor and held a proper funeral. Though Jane was furious and could have charged at the enemy in blind rage, he knew it would result in heavy losses for his side. Instead, he told the villagers it was time to unite. No matter what, they would rescue Jairo. The villagers agreed and pledged their full support. Catherine, witnessing all of this, began to question who was truly right or wrong. At first, she believed her fiancé Henry was on the right side, but now her perspective was shifting. From the very next day, Jane began training the villagers and soldiers rigorously. Gradually, each of them became skilled in weaponry and combat. They hid extra weapons in a secure place, to be used in emergencies. After weeks of preparation, they were ready to launch an assault to rescue Jairo. Following Jane's plan, all forces assembled and advanced in formation. Jane would first attempt to negotiate with Torek. Only if talks failed would they attack. But what they didn't know was that Torek was already waiting for them with a massive army. Soon, Jane arrived at the front lines and faced Torek, demanding Jairo's release. Torek responded by demanding Catherine's return first. At that moment, Jairo appeared. Catherine, however, turned to Torek and accused him of committing countless murders. She refused to go with him. Torek coldly replied that this was simply his job. He had to find her, no matter the cost. With no choice, Catherine returned to him, and the situation seemed to settle down. Jane began to retreat. But then it was revealed that Jairo now hated Jane. He blamed Jane for kidnapping Catherine in the first place, which had led to his son Tom's death. Jane was heartbroken by his brother's resentment. As Jane's army was marching through a mountain pass, a massive enemy force suddenly appeared in front of them, and Torek's second army began approaching from behind. It was an ambush meant to crush Jane's army. Realizing this, Jane warned everyone to stay alert. Some soldiers ensured Catherine was escorted safely to the palace while the rest prepared for battle. Now was the time to activate Jane's emergency plan. Some soldiers released smoke to obscure enemy vision, while others climbed the cliffs to launch attacks from above. Torek, sensing something, ordered his archers to fire arrows in every direction. Arrows rained down on Jane's army, but they raised their shields in unison, protecting themselves. Seizing the opportunity, Jane gave the order to attack. His warriors charged with long spears and began striking down enemies. Jane himself entered the battlefield, and no one could stand against him. His soldiers hurled stones from the cliffs, crushing many of Torek's men. Seeing the tide turning, Torek panicked and called for reinforcements, including the soldiers guarding Catherine, leaving her nearly defenseless. Chaos erupted across the mountain terrain. Both sides tried to annihilate each other, but Jane's army had the upper hand. Their battle plan was airtight. They continued executing it flawlessly, taking down dozens of enemy troops. Torek couldn't figure out how to regain control. His men were dying one after another. Meanwhile, back where Catherine was, new soldiers arrived, killed Torek's guards, and kidnapped her again. The battle raged on when suddenly a man announced, "Catherine is in our custody." That gave them a major advantage, because now even Jairo was with them. Hearing this, Jane and a few of his trusted men pulled back and began moving swiftly through a hidden cave route. They gave the order to retreat, saying their mission was complete. Due to the fog spreading all around, the enemy soldiers couldn't see them. As they continued deeper into the cave, they spotted Catherine, who had been held captive. A soldier close to Jane was badly injured and died in his arms. Jane had respected him deeply and gave him a proper farewell before he passed. Taking Catherine with him, Jane proceeded further into the cave. He likely had another plan in mind, one that could completely defeat Torek and King Vane. As they moved deeper, they realized many of Torek's soldiers had already reached inside. They launched a direct attack on Jane, intending to take Catherine back. But Jane's allies didn't back down. They fought back fiercely. A brutal battle broke out in the cramped cave, with everyone attacking each other. The space was so tight that escaping became nearly impossible. Jane continued to fight while protecting Catherine, but one enemy soldier slashed his eye, seriously injuring him and impairing his vision. At this point, Catherine stepped in to help. Even though Jane had kidnapped her in the beginning, he had never tried to harm her. Finding a way forward, she helped guide him deeper into the cave. Torek was close behind. After moving ahead, Catherine spotted a river. She jumped into the water with Jane and swam across to the other side, escaping unseen. Torek had no idea where they had gone and returned to his troops. Meanwhile, Jane's men set fire to the cave, forcing everyone to evacuate. Catherine and Jane made it out from the other side, and she quickly bandaged his wounded eye to stop the bleeding. Jane remained unconscious for a while. Torek, now back with his soldiers, ordered all exits to the cave sealed, knowing Catherine would eventually try to leave with Jane. Jane's remaining men were heartbroken, as many of their comrades had died. Still, they knew they had to find Jane no matter what. When Jane finally regained consciousness, he thanked Catherine for helping him. They needed to get out and reunite with their army before Torek found them. As Catherine scouted the way ahead, she was suddenly captured by Torek's soldiers, who had been tracking them on orders. Jane, soon reuniting with his team, grabbed a sword and attacked the soldiers to save Catherine. Some fled in fear, and once again, Jane had rescued her. They escaped the area just before Torek arrived. Torek knew Catherine was still with Jane and became desperate to find them. Jane, meanwhile, brought Catherine to his small kingdom where villagers lived. But even here, destruction awaited. Torek's men had attacked this place too. They spent a night in one of the houses. Catherine felt guilty, believing all this chaos was because of her. She had trusted Henry, thinking he was a good person. Jane explained that Henry was a terrible man and warned her not to return to him. The next day, Henry arrived, calling out to Catherine. Jane gave her a choice. If she still wanted to go back to Henry, she was free to leave. But Catherine chose to stay with Jane. Together, they escaped through a path leading to the forest. As they walked, they came across some of Torek's soldiers killing village children. Catherine wanted to help, but Jane said they were outnumbered and attacking now would be foolish. Ignoring him, Catherine charged toward the soldiers. Jane stayed hidden behind the trees but eventually rushed to her aid. He fought bravely, but the soldiers overpowered him due to their numbers. The soldiers sent word to King Vane that they had found both Catherine and Jane. Though Jane managed to save one child, this act inspired the villagers, who joined the fight and attacked the soldiers. Many were killed, and Jane used the chaos to lead the villagers into the forest. Jane knew the villagers had great potential if they united. So he gathered every remaining villager in the forest to speak with them. He laid out his plan. They needed to surrender Catherine to the king. Using her as a pawn in this war would be a coward's move, and he didn't want that. But the villagers had a different philosophy. In war, everything is fair, and in the end, what matters most is who stands victorious. Yet for Jane, this wasn't just about victory. He had lost too much: his loyal soldiers, his family. He didn't want more bloodshed. He wanted peace, something his late brother Jiro always dreamed of. But the villagers? They were hungry for justice. They wanted a final war, one that would decide everything. And just when Jane began considering that maybe, peace wasn't an option anymore. Somewhere far away, King Vane was feeding his lions, preparing them for the ultimate battle. It was clear. Vane had made up his mind. The time had come to erase all resistance and create one unstoppable empire. But will he succeed? Well, for that, you'll have to wait for part 2. Our story ends here.